Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're happy to have you all here this afternoon, so happy you could join us. Welcome to the past, present, and future of San Jacinto. I'm Amy Rogers. I am the Executive Director here at San Jacinto, responsible for both the San Jacinto Battleground State Historic Site and the San Jacinto Museum and Battlefield Association. And I have here with me today my colleagues. I have Cait Johnson, who is our lead educator for the San Jacinto Battleground. And I have Cecilia Abad, who is the curator at the San Jacinto Museum. So before we get started with our presentation, I have just a few housekeeping things to go over. We do welcome your questions. We hope that you'll have lots of questions for us. So please use the Q&A feature that you will see on the Zoom. Depending on your device, the Zoom toolbar will be at either the very top or the very bottom of your screen. Move your mouse there or tap your mobile device and then click or tap on the icon that says Q&A. If you don't see it, look for an icon that has 3 dots, ... and then look for something that says more, and then you should be able to see that Q&A feature. So with that, we are going to get started. Again, put your questions in, we'll answer them at the end of the presentation, and we are going to get started with Cait Johnson.
Okay, I'm waiting for the PowerPoint to pop back up. So, like Amy said, my name is Cait Johnson. I am the lead educator out here, and I'm going to be talking about the past portion of past, present, and future. A bit about what happens out on the San Jacinto battlefield, out in this peninsula before the Battle of San Jacinto, and then what happens after the Battle of San Jacinto, but before we become a historic site, which is a big old chunk of time, so I'm going to dive right in. The story of San Jacinto usually starts with the arrival of the first Anglo-American settlers out here, but that is obviously way too late in the actual story of the history of San Jacinto. Long before the McCormicks or the Lynches or Houston or Santa Ana had ever arrived to this bit of coastal prairie, Native Americans were calling it home. The earliest known human occupation on the San Jacinto Peninsula dates to about 1700 BC. That's the Middle Archaic period, if you're familiar with Native American archaeology and prehistory. In fact, one of the earliest shell middens on the upper Texas coast is located on the San Jacinto Peninsula. It's just beyond the bounds of the battlefield itself. These Native Americans were hunter-gatherers. They occupied the San Jacinto Peninsula seasonally. During the spring and summer, they would move inland to gather plants and to hunt for game. And then in the winter and fall, they would move back to the coast where they would harvest clams and oysters. Because there is such a abundance of different ecosystems out here, we're close to the ocean, and then there's the estuaries and the marshes, there's the rivers, there's coastal prairie, there's the bottomland forest. There's a lot going on in this area. That means there's a very diverse amount of flora and fauna, which allowed fairly sizable populations to exist up in this part of the Texas coast without existing on agriculture. There we go. Shell middens are the most common archaeological remains on the peninsula. Neither of these photos are from San Jacinto, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of what a shell midden looks like. A shell midden is a collection of discarded mollusk shells. It's essentially a trash heap. The remains from processing shellfish. Out at San Jacinto, the shell middens are primarily clams and oyster shells, but they do include other things such as pieces of pottery, projectile points, stone tools, the remains of other animals such as fish, turtle, bison, deer, raccoon, and snakes. So it's a pretty interesting look at what was going on at that site. And then before I do go any further, I do want to remind people that it is illegal to conduct an unauthorized archaeological excavation on public land in Texas. Please do not show up at the battlefield or any of the surrounding areas with a shovel and a metal detector thinking you're going to find Native American artifacts or artifacts from the battle. Do not do that, you will get in trouble. So I want to talk about this, but I don't want to encourage people to go looking for it themselves. The presence of Native Americans in the general San Jacinto area decreases significantly after around 1400 AD. And there are only minimal accounts from the settlers in the San Jacinto area about their interactions with Native Americans once they arrive. I know there are lots of accounts of Texians farther inland having all sorts of interactions with Native Americans, but I am very specifically talking about just this small part of the Texas coast. Most of the accounts we do have come from the Harrisburg area. DeLu Rose Harris mentions in her diary that Native Americans would come to Harrisburg to sell buffalo, bear, and deer skins, blankets, and beadwork. And then Rosa Clayburgh, who immigrated to Harrisburg in 1834, told a story about a Native American man who came into her home actually as they were moving in, and he saw this loaf of bread on her table and he took it, and in its place he put two large venison hams, told her swap, and then left. But the accounts that we get from the Texians once they arrive are pretty minimal. You'll notice that I have been saying Native American and not referring to a specific tribe. And that's because many of the remains out in San Jacinto specifically are so old that it's really difficult to associate them with a modern tribe. The two Native American groups that we know lived in this area when Europeans began to arrive were the Karankawa and the Akwakisa. The border between their traditional homelands meet around Galveston Bay. The Akwakisa homeland stretches north and northeast towards Louisiana, while the Karankawa homeland stretches south along the coast towards Mexico. But because the remains we find are so long ago, it's really hard to tell whether they belonged to these two groups or they belonged to groups who lived here long before the Karankawa or Akwakisa showed up. That might have not really left much of a record in the historical record, although obviously they left one in the archaeological record. The start of recorded history on the San Jacinto Peninsula begins with the arrival of Austin's colonists. San Jacinto is at the eastern edge of Austin's first colony. This map is from 1830. You can see the dot here. I hope y'all can see my mouse, is San Felipe de Austin, while this one over on the right-hand side is San Jacinto. So we are part of that first colony. Many of the settlers in this area were part of Austin's Old 300. The first of these settlers to officially get a land grant out here was William Scott. His land grant was issued during the summer of 1824, and his property was located across the river to the south of the battlefield. The better known of the residents out here is the McCormick family. They were issued their land grant on August 10th, 1824, shortly after Scott was. And as an aside, all of these families likely were out here beforehand, but since Stephen F. Austin hadn't finalized his arrangement with the Mexican government, which allowed him to give out land grants, they would have technically been squatting, and we don't have a ton of details and records about when exactly they arrived. The McCormick family consisted of Arthur McCormick, his wife Margaret, who was often called Peggy, and their two sons, John and Michael. They had immigrated from Ireland to New Orleans in 1818 and then on to Texas in 1823 or 1824. They built a log cabin near the southwest shore of a bay, small bay on the San Jacinto River. It's called Peggy's Lake. You can see it here. It's referred to as Peggy's Lake and not Peggy's Bay because the only opening to the river is this very narrow opening right here. So for most of the bay, it actually looks like a lake. You can see on this map, which is from the 1840s, this is where the McCormick's house was. This is where the Battleground was here. And this would have been right about where Lynch's Ferry was. The McCormick's raised cattle. In February of 1824, in December of 1824, or January 1825, Arthur McCormick had his land surveyed. And back before there was precise maps, or even, most of the land was claimed by somebody, local landmarks were used to mark the edge of a boundary. So the McCormick's League was measured from a 4-inch persimmon tree near the San Jacinto River because there was not a whole lot out here. The McCormicks knew they wanted to raise cattle on the land. They came with that idea. And so they requested that the surveyor focus on the open prairie and not the marshy land next to the rivers. In February of 1824, Arthur traveled to San Felipe de Austin to discuss a plan to establish a colony of Irish immigrants in Texas, and he was granted the credentials to do it, but he drowned on his return trip trying to cross Buffalo Bayou, and the project fell apart. His property passed to his widow, Peggy, who stayed on the land. She continued to raise cattle to sell, along with her two sons, and they were still living here in 1835 when the Texas Revolution broke out. A couple of the other notable residents in this area include Nathaniel Lynch, who founded Lynch's Ferry, David G. Burnett, who was the first president of Texas, and Lorenzo de Zavala, who was the first vice president of Texas. The nearest commercial city center was Harrisburg, which was located 10 or 11 miles to the east. It is marked here on this map with that little black dot. It was founded sometime between 1825 by John Richardson Harris. It is actually the Harrison family had founded Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a couple generations before, which is how Harrisburg, Texas got its name. And it quickly became an important depot center since supplies could usually make it that far up the Buffalo Bayou. Harrisburg was at the junction of Buffalo Bayou and Brays Bayou in Houston, kind of in eastern Houston now. And the Buffalo Bayou was pretty navigable up to that point, so smaller vessels could get in, and regular schooners ran between Harrisburg and New Orleans. At the outbreak of the Revolution, Harrisburg was a town of about 20 houses. It had a sawmill, a tannery, and a general store. And records from that general store show that most of the residents of the San Jacinto area, including Peggy McCormick, shopped and traded at the store in Harrisburg. When that brings us up to the Battle of San Jacinto. After the battle, the San Jacinto was left it was a very grisly sight. In his memoir, William Zubar, a private in the Texas Army, recalled what the battlefield looked like. He wrote, "After breakfast on the morning of the 23rd, I walked alone to the battlefield. The slain Mexicans were a grisly sight. Exposed first to a drenching rain and then to a burning sun, they were decaying rapidly and could not be moved without breaking into pieces. They sent forth a sickening stench." When Peggy McCormick returned, she had left as part of the runaway scrape along with most of the other civilians. She found that both armies had slaughtered all of her cows for food, and that her land was covered with unburied bodies. So she was understandably pretty upset. She wrote into the Texas camp to demand that General Houston bury the bodies. And she told him that the site would haunt her for the rest of her life. However, he refused to do this, to bury the bodies. He did try to calm her down by telling her, "Madam, your land will be famed in history as the classic spot upon which the glorious victory of San Jacinto was gained. Here was born in the throes of revolution and amid the strife of contending legions, the infant of Texas independence." But Peggy was a good frontier lady. She was not going to be swayed by that sort of flattery. And she responded, "To the devil with your glorious history," which is one of the great quotes from the Texas Revolution, in my opinion. The bodies of the Texas soldiers laid unburied throughout the summer and fall, both on the McCormick's land and on some of the other lands surrounding it, on her neighbors. Vultures and coyotes ate the dead pack animals, but they didn't really touch the human remains, likely because they were wearing clothing. But at least some of the bodies were disturbed by human grazers when John James Audubon, the American naturalist who's best known for his book on birds, visited in 1837. He acquired 5 skulls from the Battleground to send home to a friend in Philadelphia who wanted to study them. And there are other accounts of skulls being taken from the Battleground as a very grisly souvenir. Peggy appealed to the new Republic of Texas's government for help burying the dead, but she didn't have any success. And eventually the cows, her cows and her neighbor's cows, started to chew on the bones, which ruined the milk and the beef. It gave them such a bad taste it couldn't be sold. And so Peggy and her neighbors finally buried the bones in a mass grave. I am, by the way, having a little bit, I'm not able to advance the slides. Oh yeah, there we go, never mind. After the victory, San Jacinto area was understandably receiving quite a lot of attention from Texans. To capitalize upon this, Nathaniel Lynch established the town of San Jacinto, which was at the very tip of the San Jacinto Peninsula. So this is about where the modern site is. So here is where the town of San Jacinto is. It was just at the tip of the peninsula, across from the town of Lynchburg, which Nathaniel Lynch had established about a decade earlier. It was laid out on a 100-acre tract with 29 blocks of 8 lots each, and However, before sales of the lots could really take off, Nathaniel Lynch died in February of 1837. At the time, only 5 of the 232 lots had been sold. But despite this setback, the town continued to grow. Its economy was based on shipping, shipbuilding, and ship repair, primarily for the ships that traveled between Houston, which was also established in 1836, but grew far more rapidly than San Jacinto did, and Galveston. So because Buffalo Bayou was pretty navigable, because Buffalo Bayou was pretty navigable, Houston became an important trade center. Farmers from the inland area would bring their agriculture, primarily cotton, there so that it could be shipped onto the wider world. However, Buffalo Bayou wasn't so navigable that ocean-going ships could get in there. So instead, this cotton was brought to Houston. It was then loaded onto steamboats or river barges, taken down the Buffalo Bayou, down San Jacinto River, and to Galveston, where it was then put on larger boats and sent out to other ports. And so towns like San Jacinto and Lynchburg, which were right on Buffalo Bayou, right at the merger of Buffalo Bayou and San Jacinto River, were ideally situated to capitalize upon this trade. And by the 1840s, San Jacinto was a small but busy industrial city that was focused on the New Hope sawmill, the New Hope shipyard. It also had 2 other shipyards, so 3 in total, a wharf, a general store, 2 blacksmith shops, and a population of over 200. The town reached its peak in the 1860s and 1870s, at which point it was so large that residents' home extended all the way to the battlefield. But 1875 was the beginning of the end for San Jacinto. In January, a railroad opened up between Houston and Galveston, allowing farmers to ship their goods by rail as opposed to by river. And then on September 17th, 1875, San Jacinto and the entire area was devastated by the Indianola hurricane. The storm surge was at least 14 feet, and according to the Houston Daily Telegraph, all the houses along Buffalo Bay from Lynchburg to the bay were swept off, not a home standing on the shores of San Jacinto Bay. That's a bit hyperbolic, but there was quite a lot of devastation. And then the following year, a project by Charles Morgan to widen the waterways between Houston and Galveston was completed. And in September of 1876, the first ocean-going vessel sailed up the San Jacinto River and Buffalo Bayou into Houston. So that is the start of the Houston Ship Channel, which still runs right by the site today. So at this point, their economy was basically in shambles and their town was destroyed. It was a really rough 2 years out here. And most of the residents ended up leaving. They either moved their homes further inland where it was safer to higher ground, or they left entirely to find better economic opportunities somewhere else. The town was hit by further hurricanes. It was hit by the second Indianola hurricane in 1886, the 1900 Galveston hurricane, and then finally a hurricane in 1915 destroyed what few structures remained. The only thing that is above water from the town today is the town cemetery. In 1883, the state began to purchase the land that is now the San Jacinto Battleground. The San Jacinto State Park was founded in 1907, and the rest is history, or maybe more accurately for this webinar, it is now the present. So I will turn things over to Cecilia.
Hi, my name is Cecilia Bod, and I am the curator at the San Jacinto Museum. Let me I'm trying to get a hold of the slides. Hold on just a sec. Hello? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, perfect. I'm not sure what happened. Okay. So I'll just say next slide when I need to go to the next slide. This one's good for now. So hi, sorry about that. My name is Cecilia Bod. I am the curator at the San Jacinto Museum. Currently, the museum is working on a new exhibit titled After the Battle of San Jacinto. I chose this topic because I wanted to explore what happened to the San Jacinto veterans and Texas Revolution veterans after the revolution ended. We know that these men ended up participating and being active in the military after the San Jacinto battle. They got involved in politics, and they also got involved in establishing businesses throughout the Republic. So I wanted to look at their lives. The exhibit is organized with 3 overarching themes. The first one is immediately after the Battle of San Jacinto. The second is the Republic, and the third is life under the Republic. These 3 items are focused, coincide with the 3 spaces that we have for the special exhibit. Each section is then enhanced with sub-themes and narratives to guide the visitors as they explore the exhibit itself. The narratives throughout the exhibit tell the human experience of that historical moment. And I truly think that by providing these narratives, people can connect with these historical figures and understand the historical moments within a better perspective. My point is, it doesn't matter if you're from Texas, it doesn't matter if you're from New York or Florida. I want you to connect to the history here. The fact that you're already in a historical site, in a historical building, looking at historical artifacts, there's already a connection there. And I want you to basically read these stories and get something out of those stories. With that said, throughout this presentation, I'm going to look at some of the artifacts and some of the graphics that I used throughout the exhibit, and basically just tell you guys what I was thinking and why I chose those artifacts. So this first artifact that you see is actually from the Guerrero Battalion. The Guerrero Battalion was led by Colonel Manuel Cespedes. After 24 hours of marching, the Guerrero Battalion, when they arrived at the campsite in the morning of April 21st, 1836, these men were exhausted. They ended up going to sleep, and they ended up waking up by the surprise attack by the Texian army. Now, I thought this was an important piece to put in the front because not only does it tie in the battle itself, but these men were also part of the battle that eventually most of them died in after the battle ended. Another reason why I chose this artifact to be at the forefront of the exhibit itself is because it was also found on the battle site. We have 2 of these artifacts. One artifact was found through an archaeological dig, and another one was actually picked up on the site itself. And I think it's important, again, to kind of reiterate. I think it's also important to kind of reiterate that we are in a historical place and kind of reminding the museum visitor that this was picked up here, the battle was fought here, and these men died here. Again, we're trying to make that human connection, and we're trying to have that overall experience with visitors. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Now, these are some other artifacts. These were all owned by Santa Anna. They were all here during the Battle of San Jacinto. To the left, you have a knee buckle, and then to the right, you have a martingale. These artifacts, I'm choosing to talk about these because I want to demonstrate how these artifacts have different stories that go with it, or depending on how you want to interpret that story, you can pull stories out of them. For instance, the knee buckle was owned by Santa Anna, was after the Battle of San Jacinto happened and the Mexican army dispersed and the Texians won. The Texians went into the Mexican camp and they took the goods and then they sold it in an auction. So the sub-theme here is the spoils of war. So we have Texian veterans that come together, they purchase this knee buckle, and then they give it to Sam Houston. So that's a story there. You can pull a story from Santa Anna, the veterans, and Sam Houston. The martingale, also owned by Santa Anna, was also here during the Battle of San Jacinto, was bought by Sidney Sherman, another great San Jacinto veteran that we see here. And just depending on how you want to talk about it, in this exhibit, I'm putting it under the spoils of war, but that doesn't mean that our educators can't go through it and talk about the different aspects and the different stories that these artifacts can tell as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this one's an interesting perspective here. This is a primary document. It's actually from a Mexican governor. Oh, can you go back? This is from the Mexican governor from Nuevo León. It's a state in Mexico. And essentially this primary source, you have the governor talking, trying to rally up the Mexican people, saying that we need to go back and we need to recover Texas. And it's a very patriotic letter. He's trying to rally them up to invade Texas again, and that he can't believe that the Texians won at the Battle of San Jacinto, and he can't believe that Santa Anna is captured. How could they, right? How could the Texians do this? So this is this very patriotic letter, and I just thought it was an important aspect to show this, so that people could get an outside perspective, right? The Mexican reaction to the Texians winning. And when you go into the exhibit, I have this letter. It's translated and paraphrased in English so that the English visitor can read it and understand the gist of the letter itself. But beside it, we also have the U.S. reaction to the Texans winning the Battle of San Jacinto, which is totally two different reactions. And I just thought that was an interesting primary source to put there. And it also allows me to foreshadow the problems that the Republic will face as Sam Houston and Mayor Bubi Lamar are governing the Republic itself, and the choices that they make while they're presidents. So next slide. This artifact actually falls under the overarching theme of the Republic itself. Within this theme, I look and I compare and contrast Lamar and Houston's policies and their views and their long-term views for the Republic itself. I look at how they grew up, what their relationship with the indigenous people were when they were younger in their political careers. And this is why I have Sam Houston dressed in Cherokee dress, and I have his wool leggings, his Cherokee wool leggings. I think when we're creating exhibits, we have to use graphics and images that can enhance the story or kind of provide the visitor with an interesting little side note, right? If you look at the bottom of Sam Houston's legs, you see that he has two things tied underneath where his shins are. Well, these wool leggings would have been worn on the bottom as well. And so you see the two handles on both sides of the artifact. So they would have been tied to a certain point. We have two of them, and both of them would be showcased alongside this image so that the visitor can make that quick connection and hopefully kind of take away this little interesting fact about a different culture, about Sam Houston's high esteem and relationships with the Cherokee and the indigenous tribes here in Texas, as well as Lamar's relationships as well. Within this section, I also talk about a Mexican invasion, right? Previously, I had mentioned that I was foreshadowing that many Texians had a real fear that there might be a second invasion from the Mexicans, and there was conflict with the Mexicans. And within this section of the exhibit, I do talk about that, but I will not go into it because I want you guys to come out in April and check out the exhibit. So next slide. Now, the last aspect of the exhibit itself is life under the Republic. And this is where I really get to kind of dive into what happens, what cities are established, women, what was the role of women, and things like that. So one of the first things that we look at is the establishment of Houston. Many people don't realize that Houston was actually established just a few months after the Battle of San Jacinto, right? That it was established in August 30th, 1836 by Augustus and John Allen, that both of them were brothers from New York. And so that's an interesting aspect to it, to the story of after the Battle of San Jacinto. It's also said that it's one of the Allen brothers, Charlotte Baldwin Allen, the wife of Augustus Chapman Allen, might have financed the Allen brothers, might have financed the money to purchase for the Allen brothers to purchase the land where the city of Houston was established. And it's also rumored that she might have been the one that to say, hey, let's call this new town Houston, because that's going to draw people in. So we'll see if that's true or not, but at least we get to kind of jump into who Charlotte Baldwin is and what her role was with the city of Houston itself. Next slide. Okay, so this here is a picture of Andrew Briscoe. He's a San Jacinto veteran, and he's also one of the first people who spearheaded the first railroad in Texas itself, the Harrisburg Railroad. It was being planned in 1839. Eventually, it was abandoned, but in 1853, the Buffalo Bayou Brazos and Colorado River was initiated, and Sidney Sherman, another San Jacinto veteran, became involved in that as well. So here I'm showing basically someone who is involved in local politics in Harrisburg, but then he also becomes involved in establishing spearheading one of the first railroads in Texas, which is quite remarkable. And the next slide. Here is Jane Harris. Jane Harris, I know Cait had mentioned the runaway scrape. Jane Harris was also involved in the runaway scrape. She was married to Richard Harris, who established Harrisburg. When he died, eventually Jane Harris and her son, they moved to Harrisburg. When the Battle of San Jacinto happened, and when the Mexican army was following Sam Houston, she, along with her sons and other women and other colonists, ended up fleeing east to escape the Mexican army. When she returned home, she found her home burned down by the Mexican army. So she and her son and others had to rebuild their own home. So there's artifacts about her. It's also her daughter who ends up marrying Andrew Briscoe. So there's a nice kind of connection among the family itself. And then we can go to the next slide. The next slide. There we go. Okay, and so as we're exploring this last piece of the exhibit itself, we do look at Samuel McCullough Jr. And how he became involved in the Texas Veteran Associations and many others, and many other events in this section. In the section of this last section, I really wanted to explore the different lives, right? I wanted to bring out the women. I wanted to bring out Andrew Briscoe. I wanted to bring out the Tejano community, as well as Samuel McCullough's life after the Texas Revolution ended. What did he do? What did he become involved in? And when he remained in Texas, and what other activities was he a part of? And so out of this exhibit, I would really like for people to understand that although these men were involved in the Battle of San Jacinto or the Texas Revolution, these men remained in Texas and were proud Texans, and really wanted to bring the best in the Republic by establishing businesses or fighting for the Tejano community, or rebuilding their home. And things like that. So I really hope you all can kind of get that out of the exhibit, and that kind of concludes my talk.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, and to Cait. I'm always in awe of my talented colleagues. So now I will attempt to take control of these slides. Bear with us. Just a moment. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go with my backup and have the slides advanced for me. The joys of technology, right? So I get the the pleasure of kind of sharing with you of, well, what's next for San Jacinto? San Jacinto means so much to so many people. It has been a beloved destination for many of Texans and people from all over the world. And so where do we see the future of San Jacinto? So before I kind of launch in and share with you some of the images that I'm going to show you today, I do need to preface this with that these are conceptual drawings. We are in the early planning stages. Things can change as we move along. So don't hold us totally to these things, but we were excited to share with you the future and bring you along on this journey of what's next to come. So the image that you're seeing here is an envisioned grand entry onto the grounds and to the monument. If you have visited San Jacinto before, you are aware that you come down Independence Parkway to take the straight shot into the monument. You go down a road that's called Vista Road. You also are aware that as you're entering into the site, that you are surrounded by chemical plants, lots of industry. And so we have no way of doing away with all of the industry around us, but we thought we can at least, once you have entered on to that entrance onto the historic site, we can do our best to kind of block that out and let you fully immerse yourself into your entrance onto the grounds. We want you to be very much aware that you are coming on to the sacred grounds of San Jacinto and try to take you back to 1836. So next slide, please. This here, you see kind of what the re-envisioned area around the monument will be. The monument, of course, will remain a focal point for many to visit the site. However, you'll hear in some of my next slides how we plan to get visitors out exploring all of the grounds. So this is a great image here that shows the way that buses will come in to let out school groups. It shows that we have additional parking. Also, if you've visited San Jacinto on any of our big events, you know that parking is always a bit of a challenge. You'll see that we have some great landscaping to really let the monument shine, showcase what we have to offer, really bring the visitor into this grand entry into this space. Next slide, please. This here shows you a little bit about how the circulation of a visit would go to encourage people to go over the entire grounds. Many people aren't aware that San Jacinto actually sits on a little over 1,300 acres. And you'd be surprised how many visitors come into the site and go straight to the monument and don't necessarily know that they can actually explore the grounds where the Mexican camp was, where the Texian camp was, follow the flow of the battle pattern. And so the new planned site will make the wayfinding, the way that you go through the site, it's going to become very obvious. It's going to guide you. It's going to encourage this exploration. And you'll see too that we plan to do more restored areas of the natural landscape. Again, we want to immerse this visitor into the site. We want to bring it back to as close to its look that it would have been during 1836 and after as possible. Next slide. We'll also have some improved site interpretation. Our site interpreters, our curator, all of our staff does a great job of interpreting the site and the things that we have here through programs, through exhibitions, through webinars such as this, through lectures. But there are some people we recognize that would rather explore these areas on their own. And so we want to give them different ways to do that. We'll have immersive, we'll have apps that allow you to get immersive visuals, hear personal stories, have interactive maps, and also a way for you to easily find upcoming events or ways that you can get involved. Next slide, please. This is an exterior view of the envisioned new visitor center. This will be located, for those of you that know the monument well, there's an amphitheater space outside of the doors closest to the gift shop. This visitor center would go in that site. This site is chosen for a couple of different reasons. One, because it has been archaeologically cleared already, so we are not putting in an additional structure that's going to cover up a very historically rich area of the grounds. But you can see here that we're keeping in mind that we want to create a space that allows a long visit, that lets you have leisure time here. You can sit out on the rooftop decks and enjoy nature. You can have great views of the battleground. There will be a cafe space. You can stay, have a snack, have a beverage, spend time with your family. We want you to get the most out of your visit. Next slide. This is a proposed interior view of one of the gallery spaces that would be located within the visitor center. We call this the Converging Forces Gallery. We kind of envision the visitor center kind of being broken down into a couple different areas. You will have what we call the 1836 theater area, which gives you that introduction, to the space. Gives you the history that leads up to the battle, the history after, tells you about our other historic sites and how they play into the Texas Revolutionary story. This particular gallery that you see here allows you to go up to these virtual soldiers or key people of the battle, interact with them, hear their stories, hear what role they played in the battle. Again, very interactive for guests. And another area that would be within the visitor center is what we call the Decisive Victory area, which talks about what this battle meant to Texas and the rest of the United States, why it was such a pivotal moment in history. And then within the monument, we talk about the legacy of the battle and turn the monument more into what it was originally meant to be, a testament to these soldiers that gave their lives for this battle. Next slide, please. Again, you see here just a quick experience plan layout of how the new visitor center will connect into the monument, how the monument will play into the overall feel of the grounds. I think it's a great visual to see how they would connect together. You have a land bridge that goes over. This makes it easy for guests to explore both spaces when visiting the visitor center. And it's also a great starting point to then go out and explore the grounds. And that is the end of my visuals, but I do want to say that we're extremely excited about the future of San Jacinto. We're honored to get to tell the story of San Jacinto, whether we're talking about the past, whether we're talking about what's happening here presently, or getting everyone excited about what's to come in the future. And we thank you for being here today. And we definitely want to open it up for Q&A. So we're going to look through some questions here. And I have one for Cait. Why did the other parts of the Mexican army operating in Texas, the forces commanded by Urrea, not come to Santa Anna's rescue after the April 21st battle?
That's a great question. And it was it was something that Houston was very concerned about, because the Mexican army, even though he'd had this really decisive victory at San Jacinto, he'd only defeated about a third of the Mexican army, and it had taken his entire army to do it. So his forces were still significantly outnumbered, and that's why it was so important that Santa Anna was captured the next day. And so he was captured, taken to Houston, who was under the surrender tree. We all know the painting. And what Houston required him to do, it wasn't actually the treaties that ended the war weren't signed there. That would happen a couple weeks later in Velasco. But Houston did get Santa Anna to write to his generals right then that day and tell them to fall back. And that was in exchange for his life, essentially. So that's why they didn't. And then why they didn't come out on the 22nd was they didn't know about the defeat yet. They wouldn't figure that out till, I believe, the 23rd is when the one Mexican soldier who manages to escape and make it back to the Mexican camp at Fort Bend doesn't arrive until after Santa Anna has already been captured.
Thank you, Cait. I'm going to take a question here that says, we are talking a lot about future visits, and you're right. However, they've never visited before. What is currently available for visitors now? So that's a great question. So the Battleground, the grounds themselves are open 7 days a week, outside of some holidays, which you can find listed on our website. So you can explore the grounds. We have some wayfinding signage, some interpretive panels throughout the grounds. We have a map that you can pick up, or we also have an app that allows you to use on your mobile device to help you explore the grounds. The museum is open Wednesdays through Sundays, 9 to 6. And within the museum, you can see our permanent exhibit. You can see our film, Texas Forever, which is a great, great film. And you can also participate in any of our programs that are going on any given weekend. And you will not be able to see the special exhibit just yet. And that'll roll into another question that we had, which was, when does the special exhibit open? And it will be opening the week of San Jacinto Day. So we hope to have you here to see the new exhibit and participate in our San Jacinto Day event. What next question do we want?
There's a question I wanted to answer about the Audubon skulls that I mentioned. Cynthia asked, were they ever tracked down or recovered? Yes, they were. In 2009, they were rediscovered in the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, which is in Philadelphia. And a forensic artist named Amanda Danning has done some really cool work with them. If you ever get a chance to hear her speak, I would really recommend it. She does a fantastic job.
Good. Okay, let's see. So we have a question about timeline for the new facilities, I'm assuming is what they're referring to. So we're, like I said, we're in the very early stages of kind of the conceptual ideas, and we're just at a 50% on those. The timeline for the actual construction is going to be pretty dependent on this legislative session and the hopeful money that is rewarded to the site to do that. But all in, all said and done, it's likely a 3 to 5 year process. Let's see. Cecilia, there's a question for you if you want to take it live. Will the new exhibit features that were pictured be touchscreen interactive displays?
I wish they were. They will be displayed, but they will be behind acrylic cases. But we will have very we're going to have great visuals and great graphics, so that can kind of engage the visitors through. But that's something that I think in the future we may want to move towards.
Okay, let's see. There's a question here. Are there any plans to acquire additional land surrounding the park? The answer to that is always yes. It's of course a complicated process. We have to wait for something to come up if one of the plants has abandoned it or is looking to sell, or a parcel comes up for sale. We have to, decide what significance it will play into the site, secure funding. We are happy to report that we have recently secured a piece of land that through archaeology work and surveys is determined to be the Almonte surrender site. And so that will be incorporated into the site through the new planning. We will likely be conducting more archaeology work on that site and eventually putting an archaeology center there for students to continue to learn and practice that trade. So the answer is always yes. We're always looking to add more parcels of land back into the grounds. Just see any others.
There's a question about where the casualties are buried. The Texian soldiers who died are buried over in the Texian camp, which is the part of the site that is closest to the ship channel. And they are under an obelisk that was originally, when it was put here in the 1880s, called the San Jacinto Monument, and then had to get a name change when the current San Jacinto Monument was built. It's now called Brigham's Monument. As for the Mexican dead, we do not know where they are buried. We know they were buried in a mass grave, but we don't know the exact location for that. And we don't want to disturb them any further. It's considered a final resting place.
see. Do you guys see any others that you want to take? I see a question here. Will the battleship Texas slip and the reflecting pond be filled in or restored? So that's a great question. That is certainly up for discussion, has been discussed, remains in discussion. We don't yet have answers to that. I know that the ultimate goal is to restore the grounds back as much as possible, and that would certainly require both of those areas being filled in. I know that the battleship slip is still a bit up in the air. The reflection pool likely will be filled in. However, the structure will not be removed. So let's say 100 years down the road, the reflection pool is something that needs to be, is deemed to be an important aspect of the site in that time period. It can be easily, the fill can be removed and the pool will still be, the structure will still be there. Another question. I see here, is there an exhibit planned on the construction of the monument? You're not going to like my answer to that, but yes, we did have an exhibit on the construction of the monument that was up for a little over 2 years here in the museum. That's actually the exhibit that's currently being removed. However, the good side of that answer is that you didn't totally miss it, because there will be a portion of the exhibits that are shown in the monument when we get the new exhibit center, visitor center, sorry, that will speak to the construction of the monument, because it's such a fascinating story that so many people love to hear about it. That will be incorporated into the permanent exhibit once the visitor center is built. Did you want to take the one that just came in, Cait?
Yeah, so Larry asked who buried the dead Mexican soldiers and who paid for that. It was the McCormicks and a couple of their neighbors. Eventually, the people in the peninsula banded together and said something had to be done. And so they paid for a couple of local guys to dig the grave.
Good. I also see a question or two here about is the elevator working? That's also been the question of the year. We have been diligently acquiring parts and working on restoring the elevator. It could be working as soon as San Jacinto Day. Things are looking really great. Things have been going well. We've had several tests done just this week that say we may have finally found all of the kinks, but don't hold me to that. But this is me being cautiously optimistic that we have finally sorted out the puzzle that is a very old pieced together elevator, and it's basically brand new at this point. So we're getting there. They want to know, is there a book describing the construction of the monument?
Not to my knowledge, there are a handful of articles written about it, but I don't think there is a kind of comprehensive summary about how the monument was constructed.
I think. See. They're wanting to know, did we discuss the ferry access to the monument, and will there be changes to that? I assume you're referring to the current Lynchburg ferry that the Harris County operates. And as far as I am aware, that will not change, that will remain. That will stay here as another access point to get to San Jacinto. I think we might have time for one more. Oh, this is a great question. What events are coming up at the site? pick a day and we can give you an event. Our team has done a great job. They've got lots and lots of things happening at all times. Of course, the biggest one that's on our mind, San Jacinto Day events, of course, which this year is on April 22nd. We'd love to have you out. Living history demonstrations, reenactment, vendors, food, lots of fun. Maybe the most recent that Cait's thinking, just this Friday and Saturday, our spring break Join the Texian Army program will happen. And what else what do we talk about for San Jacinto Day? We have lecture series, lots and lots of programs that you can find on both our website and the THC website. Do you have something, Cait?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the San Jacinto Family Day, which is a new initiative we're doing this year, the first Saturday of every month, which in April will be April 1st. Kids are free into the museum with the purchase of an adult ticket, and we will have a special living history hands-on activity from 11 to 3. In April, it's going to be making bullets out of crayon wax, but demonstrating the way that it would have been done during the Texas Revolution. And then in May, we will have, we're making candy cartridges. So we're going to make traditional bullet cartridges, but using candy instead of gunpowder and bullets. So make it a little bit more family friendly that way. So do check our website. We have a number of our upcoming family days already on there, and it's a really great way to share this history with your family.
Definitely. And so with that, we're just about running out of time. So I will end with, of course, thanking you all for being here today. Everyone is incredibly busy, and we're happy that you decided to spend an hour with us. Thank you to my colleagues, Cait Johnson, our lead educator, Cecilia, our curator at the San Jacinto Museum. I work with some very talented individuals, which makes my job a lot easier. I also want to say, aside from the programs here at San Jacinto within THC and our other sites, at any given time, there's a program that you can participate in, whether it's in person or virtual. So watch out for those programs by going to the THC website, their social media accounts, or subscribing to the email newsletter, which the newsletter is a great way to get information on all of the things going on from all the different departments. And you can find that at thc.texas.gov. So again, thank you so much. We're happy that you were here, and thank you so much for your participation and all of your great questions.